he used to invite me.
Right? If there's an appeal that may take place. But anyway, nevertheless, so the two individuals that were with them were captured the next day, but my nephews were on the run. So I'm living in Delaware, and one of my sisters, Angie, whose name is, the police, when they finally captured them, they caught them in Philadelphia. And what saved my uncle and saved my aunt and the rest of the family there, because they could have lost their home and everything, right, for being charged with harboring, right, fugitives, was that they had the feds had went in and had read the letter that my sister had written him, telling him that my nephews were on the run, because he didn't know that. They didn't tell him that. So of course they were captured. The trial takes place, and of course they were sentenced to life in prison for their crime. So along comes this book in 2010. With this person calling themselves Westmore.
Was it like 9 years later, right?
Well, yeah. 9 years later.
Yeah.
Along comes this book with somebody saying that I'm the other Westmore. But the interesting fact that occurred was that I had gotten a call from Donnie Glover, somebody who I know. I went to school with Donnie Glover at Dunbar, so we have history. You know what I mean? So it's like when anybody pop up and say, because you just pop up and start saying you from certain neighborhoods, right? Depending on what's happening in them neighborhoods. You can get your wigs smacked off. You know what I mean? You say, well, you from where? Right? You say, first thing I'm gonna ask you.
Yeah, Donnie's dad was a colleague of mine.
Right.
In fact, I buried his dad when he passed away.
Right. So you have what we call street cred, right? You do that, you in prison, you do that in the wrong place. You tell somebody you from this part of town, and especially in cities like Baltimore and Chicago, which is all about territory. It's all about high schools where you went to in Baltimore. So when Donnie, brought it to me, he just said, there's this guy that wrote this book, Westmore. And I said, well, wait a minute, stop right there. I said, because the other Westmore is my nephew, right? So Donnie said he felt that the guy was using, of course, the downfall of one black man to try to, of course, promote himself. Okay. But he could never offer up any information as far as if this boy was from Baltimore, where was he raised in Baltimore? Just like I was able just to recall elementary school I went to, recreation center. There was nothing that Donnie could say to me to say that this is, proof that this boy, Westmore, who's calling himself the other Westmore, was from Baltimore. So, I said I would never promote something like that, right? But there was never no invitation to say, all right, let me get him on the phone. This is how we was always taught in the Nation of Islam. Somebody come to you and say something about me, or vice versa, then I say, well, let me get the person on the phone. Let's talk. You understand? Right. There was never no invitation to say, well, let me get this Westmore on the phone so we can talk about it, right? So what had happened was, whoever his handlers were that crafted this scheme to bring him to Baltimore and then say he's from Baltimore and use a tragedy such as the death of the officer, but also the tragedy of the entire family who was hurt by this, right? Because they didn't come out the womb being killers, right? They didn't come out the womb robbing, right? So you can't blame the entire family for what two individuals have done, right?
Absolutely.
So, but this was the stigma that was put on my family. This was the stigma. It wasn't just put on his mother. But when you read that book, he's talking about my birth mother, right? He's not talking about my older sister, Mary, who was like a mother to me when my mom died at 7 years old. And you know what it's like for a child to lose his mother at 7, right? But that's not talked about in the book from my family's perspective. That's talked about as if it's just like a footnote. You know what I mean? Well, Alma, she died, and the father was a drunk. You say, wait a minute, what does that have to do with my nephew? If my nephews wasn't born until after my mother died, why are you talking about my mother? Why are you talking about my father? If the story is about the other Westmore, why are you talking about somebody who wasn't there before he even came on the scene? But this is, again, what he felt he had to do throughout the book. So the book was based on, of course, lies, but he got information when he decided to do this book and his handlers from talking to my older sister, Mary Moore, talking to one other sister, and talking to my nephew in prison. And of course, my nephew, you behind prison, you don't see things as those of us who are older than you can see the bigger picture. So my nephew may have thought that perhaps by talking to this boy Westmore, right? But when I went and read some of what's there online, because I refused to purchase the book, but my nephew was giving him so much information about himself. When my nephew said to him, okay, I've told you enough about me. Now tell me about yourself. See, that should have been a red flag to my nephew, that this boy is not from Baltimore, because he couldn't tell him anything about himself. Should have been a red flag to my sister. This boy is not from Baltimore. Should have been a red flag to my other sister, Kathy Denise, when she talked to him. She said, this boy ain't from Baltimore because he's not offering any information about where he grew up, right? From schools to school teachers, right? To counselors, classmates. It's nobody that could, you always call him, the Larry Young Morning Show. First thing you say, what? Classmates, right? You talk to Gene, you talk about classmates, right? Yeah. It was nobody that could, I would say only those with bad credit need co-signers. It was nobody that could co-sign for this boy Westmore to say he grew up in Baltimore. Not even his mother. That's the sad part. That as mothers, you teach your children to tell the truth. How could his mother let this lie be spun? Not just in the book, but he went on tours around the country, on Oprah Winfrey Show, on The View.
Yeah, that's when I first learned about it.
On PBS.
On his national show.
Yeah, on the national show. You've never heard of him.
He went on these national talk shows.
Right.
And they introduced him, and this book came up about the other Westmore.
Yeah.
And that's when I heard about your nephew. Because I knew about the incident. Right. But I did not know the guys' names that were involved until this thing came up with Westmore. Go ahead.
Yeah. So this is where most of, and they said that this book was, of course, a New York Times bestseller. And you say, well, wait a minute. Well, you know, most black folk didn't even know this, right? But this is, again, how it was, to push the Westmore was to sell Westmore as a brand, sell Westmore as a household name, sell Westmore as a hashtag, is what they were essentially saying. But what he was saying through this book, I'm the good Westmore, this is the bad Westmore. I'm the Westmore who was in the military. And then all them lies get exposed, right? Rhodes Scholar, right? After Cecil Rhodes, knowing the history of Cecil Rhodes in Africa, right? Johns Hopkins, and notice when everybody was talking about taking down statues, nobody ever said let's take down John Hopkins statues, right?
A slave owner.
Right, a slave. They went around the corner, took down the daughters of the Confederacy, right there on Wyman Park. You say, wait a minute, don't you know just right up the block is John Hopkins' head sitting on the bus, and y'all ain't said nothing about that, right? But you say you woke. You know what I mean? Yeah. Right?
So John Hopkins, they got them black folk out their houses and didn't give them nothing.
Absolutely.
And now half of them homeless.
That's right. Yeah. I was working with SMEAC back then. So that's where we are with this book. And of course, what you saw was the interview with Fox 45. And the sad part, as I said, because black media, the Afro knows about this. I've watched Sean Yost be on.
Now that's my question too. What black media did you go to and they didn't want to touch it?
None of them wanted to touch it. The only one that reached out to me prior to you was Coach Butch McAdams. Okay. And he's all the way down the road in D.C., right? So,
and y'all see that he's here with me. Right. So can't nobody say I didn't want to touch it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So it's, the black media didn't want to touch the story. And again, they, as I said before, they know my integrity throughout the years. Right. So the black media hasn't really wanted to touch this story about Westmore. Many of the black politicians don't want to touch it, you know what I mean, for whatever reason, because he's in this governor's race. And as I said, I don't have a dog in the fight. Right. So I'm not interested in whether he was running for governor, whether he's running for mayor, whether he's running for state's attorney, whether he's running for a dog catcher. Wrong is wrong and right is right. So for those that would say, well, Brother Muhammad, the book's been out for 10 years, 12 years. I always say, as Dr. King said, the time is always right to do what's right. You understand? Right. And as I mentioned the other day, Roots, which we found out later, wasn't written by Alex Haley. Alex Haley didn't know when that book came out and the miniseries came out, he really thought he got off scot-free. But it wasn't until 10, 20 years later when Harry Colander filed that lawsuit against Alex Haley, right? Mm-hmm. And same thing with the autobiography of Malcolm X. Through my relationship with Dick Gregory, he was the first one to tell me that Alex Haley, who was Navy intelligence, never wrote Malcolm X. You understand? That was written by a man named Maury Fisher, who was the editor for Playboy and Reader's Digest at that time. Right. So if you can look back and use that as examples, that it doesn't matter how long you say the book's been out. But then what happened was this dossier that was circulating, and the dossier which Westmore believed was released by John King, who he and John King still sit on the board of the Robin Hood Foundation. So obviously,
now which John King is this?
John King used to just running for governor now. Used to be Secretary of Education under Barack Obama. Okay.
So there's a couple John Kings. That's why I just want to get
So he's claiming the King campaign released the dossier, but rather than again deal with the facts of what's in the dossier, then we got caught, of course, when Melinda Frost from Fox 45 confronted him. She said, I thought you said you was born in Baltimore. She asked him, well, what part of Baltimore was you born in? He said, West Baltimore. And then she said, what part of West Baltimore? You know what he said? Waverly. Now everybody knows Waverly ain't in Westmore. You understand? So the boy given an opportunity 6 weeks ago to come clean, he still wouldn't come clean. But this is all the things that he said he's been taught in the United States military, what he's been taught, and of course these schools of academia that he's attended about being honest, about having integrity, about character. So this goes directly to the character and integrity of Westmore, and of course not even talking about the millions of dollars that he's made off this book where it's been required reading in certain Maryland schools and certain Baltimore City public schools as well. That this is what we've seen happen.
Well, Darren, as a part of the family, as a representative of the family of the Westmore, is there anything this guy can do to rectify whatever he's done that you all will feel vindicated or satisfied with at all?
Well, I think that you got to come clean. You got to own it.
I agree
First
with
thing
that.
you do is you have an apology to my family, right? Because when he got caught, he tried to say the only victims in the book was Sergeant Bruce Prothero and his family, and nothing could be further from the truth. He's one of many victims that's in that book, right? So he still keeps covering. It's almost like the cover up is worse than the crime for the most part, right? Yeah. But he got to have an apology. Drop out of this governor's race. Because you got to go on all them shows you went on to spin that lie. Now you got to go in there and tell the truth, as the old TV show used to say, right? You got to tell the truth, right? Is what you must do. And then take your mother with you. Because his mother knows this information, but because either she was being funded and cared for by the Annie Casey Foundation, which worked to move all them black folk out of there with John Hopkins, if you know that history, over there in East Baltimore. So clearly...
Now, is that the nonprofit he was supposed to be in charge of?
No, Robin Hood Foundation, which is one of the worst foundations in the history of America. One day I'm going to do a whole show in the Robin Hood Foundation, show you how they claim to be anti-poverty, but all they're pushing are these social impact bonds, which is to only make more money for themselves. They're just using black folk and poor folk. Is what the Robin Hood Foundation is. It's basically a bunch of hedge fund owners and private equity fund owners that sits on the board. Soros is one of them. So when you know the history of George Soros, you ain't got to look no further. Right. But you got to do that and then stop creating division in my family. What he's tried to do after my brother confronted him was that he had access to my nephew in prison and asked my nephew to ask my brother to back up off of him. So this shows you how deceptive he is, right? After using my nephew, right, then going to send word to my nephew through prison officials to ask my brother. I got a call from my nephew, and I ain't talked to my nephew in years. I got a call after I was on the Fox 45 TV show, right, doing the interview. And my nephew, of course, him and I said, we sit down, we'll talk as family. Once they lift the COVID restrictions, then I can visit him. Right. But this is bigger than my nephew, because my nephew ain't the only one in the book that he's talking about. You understand what I'm saying? That's my history that's in the book. That's my family's history in the book. So I can't let my nephew or my older sister think that they're the only victims in this book that's being talked about, or the only ones that have, of course, in terms of the not just the legality, but we have the right to confront Westmore about what's in that book, about what he said, about what was done. We got a right to do that. So when you see him or his handlers try to divide our family, then you know that just with us telling the truth has them on the defense, right? So he has to take responsibility and own up for this, and then come clean and tell the whole truth.
One of the things he should have done, in my opinion, before he wrote the book, he should have came to y'all.
Yes, he came to 2 sisters and my nephew. That's it.
Yeah,
I have 5 sisters and 2 brothers. I'm the youngest of 8. Okay. So he definitely wasn't coming to me, right? So this is the division that he's created and then within the family, and then of course in the book is what he's doing is embellishing, right, things that never happened to my family to make himself look big, or to make my family look like they're a bunch of dreads of society. I mean, they brought my sister Mary Moore. They brought her they flew her out to the Oprah Winfrey for the show and everything, but all of that was to make her the poster child of what's wrong with black women in the country. They were saying she's basically the worst black mother or worst mother in the country because of what her sons did. And mind you, when they took part in this crime, they were 29 years old and 23 years old. They were not teenagers. They were grown men. You understand? Right. So all of this has caused her great pain, that this has now come back up to her, just as is done with Sergeant Bruce Prothero family. Right. The great pain of, again, this being brought back up, but also seeing how Westmore is trying to profit off of this.
Now, has Prothero's family come out about this book?
Yes, yeah. His brother did an interview last week with Mackenzie Frost over Fox 45, and he also read a statement, and she read a statement from the widow of Sergeant Bruce Prothero, and the FOP recently came out 2 nights ago talking about, of course, Westmore and this book, and how, of course, there's so many erroneous inaccuracies in the book, and how he's tried to use it to exploit the death and this whole situation to basically self-promote himself, and now think that that could be used to launch his, buying perhaps the governor's mansion for the most part.
Yeah, I'm getting ready. We're getting ready to open up for calls. If you want to call in, might have some questions for Darren. Telephone number is 410-761-1592. 410-761-1592. We're going to come to the lines in a minute because I have a couple more questions for Darren. One of the questions, Darren, we got 120 homicides in this city of less than 600,000 people.
That's right.
What do you think? Now, I'm going to tell you straight up. I am sick of hearing the mayor getting on there with the same old, every time something happens.
Right.
Commissioner, the same thing. Both of them coming up with this crap out. They got a 5-year plan. Well, we don't need no damn 5-year plan. We need a plan now.
Need a 5-minute plan, 5-second plan, 5-block plan, 5-week plan, right?
What? As people, both of us are out in the community.
Right.
Both of us find out things that everybody don't know about.
Right.
What do you think can be done to save this city right now? Because this city is in, and I am not in love with Fox 45.
Right.
Okay? Now, I do go along with them on a lot of their school stuff.
Right.
Because they be uncovering
absolutely
stuff.
Yes.
Okay? But when they say this city is in a crisis, they are correct.
Right. Yes, sir.
They are correct.
Right.
And what do you think, as a fellow brother, a fellow fighter, one who's in the community,
yes,
one who's doing good things in the community, one who's got one of the finest talk shows in Baltimore, black. Anyway, what do you think is the key to getting this city in order before we go to the phone?
Well, part of it is leadership, and leadership has to have a vision.
You
have to. And as it relates to, of course, just the violence that we're seeing, you got to ask, where's the deployment of the police officers? Now, that shooting yesterday, normally, I'm in that Monument Street corridor. I know many of you saw those brothers that was here earlier that came in, right? Monument Street, Rose Street, right? Rose Street Community Center, Brother Walker Gladden and Brother Clayton Guyton, right? All the other brothers and sisters that are in that community tell you they know Brother Muhammad for years in terms of my work, of course, as an activist and member of Nation of Islam. But as it relates to what we're looking at, where's the deployment? Normally, there's always a police officer, there's always a car sitting right there at that corner on Rose Street Cross, at that liquor store. And the question is, where were they yesterday? Because they normally are there. When they got all these Hispanics working in the community, the Hispanics come in with you ever see the police doing security on the Hispanic workers? They sit in their trucks so that the Hispanic workers will not be robbed coming to work, while they at work, or when they get off work. You can't tell me you got enough police officers and off-duty police officers and security to protect workers who's coming in the community that may not even be legal citizens in the country. Can't tell me you can protect 70,000 people at a Ravens game, 14,000 at an Orioles game, but you can't protect black folk that's right in the confines of this community right here. If the shooting had occurred 4 blocks up by John Hopkins, the mayor would have been there before the paramedics got there.
They'd have cut off the whole community.
But because it happened on Monument and Rose Street, you didn't see the mayor, nor did you see the state's attorney. Yeah. So it's all about where their priorities, because essentially they're saying is they don't mind crime occur in certain neighborhoods, just contain it and don't let it spill over. And to Fell's point, when the shooting occurred last week right there by Port Covington, see how quick the mayor got there? Mm-hmm. Right? That's Sagamore. That's Under Armour Mini City right there.
That's right.
But when it's happening in Port West Baltimore up there, Wrightstown and Bournemouth, can't find the mayor. Right? So this is what we see that's going on right now. Yep. And of course, Ms. Briscoe, I think the Deputy Commissioner of Deployment. The question should be to her, where were your officers when these crimes are taking place? A lot of crimes are crimes of passion, as far as relationships, right? As P.M. Smith, sometimes I may agree with him, disagree with him. The other part, you got a lot of these dice games that's going on. You got young brothers winning the dice game, and the other guys trying to get their money back. And they're going to get it back by hook or crook. And if you don't crack down on these illegal dice games, right, when they're shooting dice, then you're basically saying that it's okay for them to do it. And this is what we're going to see. And we're 2 weeks from the summer right now. So the old saying goes, you never plan to fail, you just fail to plan. We 2 weeks from summer right now. If you ain't got no plan right now, it's already too late.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the phones. First caller is Jamal. Jamal, you on air.